Just moments ago, the Pentagon quietly raised the alert level across multiple U.S. airbases in the Middle East. Locations in Qatar, UAE, and Bahrain are now on maximum readiness, with air defense systems activated. Officials say this is due to a credible threat, and at Aero 3:40 a.m. Eastern Time on April 16, 2026, a classified directive moved through the chain of command inside the Pentagon. Within minutes, that directive reached forward operating bases across the Gulf. And Eli in Sir in Hensur in Densur in Gur in Densur in Densur in Den Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and naval support activity Bahrain. According to insider sources familiar with the situation, the message was short, precise, and chilling. Elevate to full defensive posture immediately. That doesn't happen unless something serious is already in motion. Now, here's where things get even more intense. By Aero 4:15 a.m., radar systems across these bases were reportedly switched into high-sensitivity tracking mode, a setting typically reserved for incoming missile threats or hostile aircraft activity. Confidential informants inside regional command centers are now saying that multiple aerial defense systems, including Patriot missile batteries and THAAD units, were placed on standby with live targeting protocols. I need you to understand how serious this is. This is not a drill. This is not routine readiness. This is what happens when military planners believe something could hit center in dose karakazen do idowitzer and hit soon. And yet, officially, almost nothing has been said. No public briefing from the Pentagon. No direct confirmation of the threat's origin. Just quiet movements, silent repositioning, and a growing sense of urgency behind closed doors. But if you follow the pattern, if you look at how these alerts have been triggered in the past, there's a very clear implication. Intelligence has identified a potential strike window, and that's where Iran enters the picture. According to multiple defense analysts and confidential informants speaking off the record, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has significantly increased activity over the past 24 hours. Satellite imagery captured late on April 15th reportedly shows unusual movement near missile storage facilities outside Bandar Abbas and Khuzestan province. Transport vehicles, launch equipment, and what appear to be mobile missile platforms were seen repositioning under cover of darkness. But wait, what happened next will shock you. At approximately 05:10 a.m. Gulf Standard Time, an unidentified drone reportedly approached restricted airspace near a U.S. naval group operating in the Persian Gulf. Fighter jets were scrambled. The drone disappeared before interception. No confirmation on origin. No wreckage. No explanation. And here's the critical detail. This happened just minutes before the alert levels were raised. Coincidence? Or something more coordinated? Stay with me, because this next part changes everything. Insider sources within U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, are now quietly suggesting that this credible threat may not be a single event. Instead, it could be part of a larger synchronized operation, a multi-layered strike involving drones, cruise missiles, and possibly ballistic assets designed to overwhelm air defenses through sheer volume and timing. If that's true, then what we're looking at isn't just a warning, it's the early stages of a potential attack sequence. And here's the part that should really concern you. Historically, when alerts like this are triggered across multiple bases at the same time, it indicates that the threat is not localized. It's regional, coordinated, possibly even strategic. In other words, this isn't about one base being targeted. This is about the entire U.S. military footprint in the Gulf being placed on edge all at once. Now think about that for a second. Why would multiple countries, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, all move into maximum readiness simultaneously unless the intelligence pointed to something bigger than a single strike? Something widespread, something designed to send a message. And that raises the question no one is answering publicly. What does Iran gain from this, and why now? Because timing matters, and the timing here is anything but random. Over the past week, tensions between Washington and Tehran have been quietly escalating behind the scenes. Diplomatic channels have gone cold. Military rhetoric has intensified. And according to confidential informants, there have been at least 2 undisclosed incidents involving U.S. reconnaissance assets being targeted electronically over the Gulf. Electronic warfare. Drone incursions, missile movements. Piece by piece, the pattern starts to form, but the full picture, that's still hidden. And that's exactly what makes this moment so dangerous. I need you to understand how serious this is. Because when military forces shift from monitoring and to preparing, it usually means one thing. So that the refer and defer and or they der error is and there and so and they believe something is about to happen. Not next week, not tomorrow, but possibly within hours. And yet, despite all of this, there's one massive detail that hasn't been explained. Something that insider sources are only hinting at. Something so sensitive it hasn't been confirmed publicly. A specific intelligence intercept allegedly picked up late last night that may have triggered this entire chain reaction. What was in that intercept? Who sent it? And why did it cause such an immediate escalation across multiple U.S. bases? That's the question no one is answering, and Sarah and Darasons and me. Saren, and it's the question everything depends on. Because if that intercept reveals what some analysts believe it does, Hendor Aravi Argarsen Inforsen Burs Ar Echafenduri, then this situation isn't just escalating. It's already in motion, and what comes next could change everything. But to understand that, you need to see what's been building behind the scenes for weeks, the hidden timeline, the rising tension, and the events that led us to this exact moment. And trust me, what I'm about to show you in part 2 will make this situation even more terrifying. To understand why the Pentagon just raised alert levels across multiple bases, you have to go back. Not months, not years, but just a few days. Because what's happening right now didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building step by step in a way most people never noticed. On April 12, 2026, at approximately 11:20 p.m. local time, a U.S. surveillance drone operating over the northern Persian Gulf experienced what officials later described as severe electronic interference. According to insider sources, the drone didn't just lose signal, it was actively jammed. Its navigation system glitched, its feed went dark, and for nearly 4 minutes, U.S. operators had no control. Now, that alone is serious, but what happened next is what changed everything. Confidential informants within defense intelligence revealed that the jamming signature matched known Iranian electronic warfare systems, specifically units believed to be operated by the IRGC's aerospace division. That means this wasn't random. It was deliberate, targeted, and more importantly, it was a test. Stay with me because this next part changes everything. Just 24 hours later, on April 13th, multiple U.S. naval vessels reported increased drone activity in international waters near the Strait of Hormuz. Not one drone, not two, but several, appearing briefly on radar, then vanishing. No confirmed origin. No debris recovered. But here's the key detail most people missed. These drones weren't attacking. They were probing. They were testing response times, tracking radar coverage, identifying blind spots. This is classic pre-strike behavior, something military planners do before launching a coordinated operation. And it didn't stop there. By April 14th, satellite imagery, reviewed by independent analysts and quietly confirmed by confidential informants, showed increased logistical movement inside Iran. Convoys moving at night, storage facilities opening, equipment being relocated. One analyst described it like this: it looks like pieces on a chessboard being repositioned before a major move. Now fast forward to April 15th. This is where things accelerate. At 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time, a secure communication reportedly took place between U.S. Central Command and senior Pentagon officials. The contents of that call remain classified, but according to insider sources, it involved a credible multi-vector threat assessment. Multi-vector. That's a term you don't hear unless multiple types of attacks are being considered at the same time: drones, missiles, cyber, possibly even naval assets. I need you to understand how serious this is, because a multi-vector attack is designed to overwhelm defenses. It's not about one strike, it's about many, hitting at once from different directions, creating confusion, delay, and maximum impact. And here's the part that should concern you even more. At 10:30 p.m. that same night, April 15th, Signals Intelligence reportedly picked up an encrypted transmission originating from within Iranian territory. The contents haven't been made public, but multiple confidential informants say the message included timing markers and coded references to operational phases. In plain terms, it sounded like preparation, it sounded like coordination, and it sounded like something was about to begin. But wait, what I'm about to tell you next takes this to another level. Around midnight, Gulf-based radar systems detected brief spikes in activity consistent with missile system calibration. Not launches, not yet, but calibration. Testing trajectories and aligning targeting systems. That's something that happens right before deployment, not days before, not weeks before, right before. Now connect that with what we saw in part one, and Dara Sos and King Tier and Dara Sun Sapper and Dara and Gara and Dara, the sudden alert across US bases, the drone incursion, the rapid activation of air defenses. This isn't random. This is a sequence. And every step in that sequence is pointing in one direction, toward escalation, toward confrontation, towards something that hasn't happened yet, but might be closer than anyone expected. And here's where the emotional tension really starts to rise. Because if this is what it looks like, if Iran is preparing for a coordinated strike, then the US isn't just reacting, it's bracing. Bracing for impact on their and I need you to understand how serious this is, because once both sides move into this kind of posture, the margin for error disappears. One miscalculation, one false signal, one misinterpreted radar blip, and suddenly you're not talking about tension anymore. You're talking about conflict, real conflict. Now here's something else most people aren't being told. According to insider sources within regional command, at least 2 allied nations in the Gulf have quietly elevated their own defense readiness levels. No public announcements, no press releases, just silent preparation. Why? Because they're seeing the same intelligence, they're reading the same signals, and they're coming to the same conclusion. Something is coming, but what exactly that is still isn't clear. And that uncertainty, that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because when you don't know what's coming, you prepare for everything. And preparing for everything means assuming the worst. Now, before we go any further, if you're watching this and you want real-time breakdowns like this, not surface-level headlines, but what's actually happening behind the scenes, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications. Because what I'm about to reveal next, and somewhere in, you're not going to hear it anywhere else. And trust me, you need to hear it. Because in part 3, we're going to break down the one piece of intelligence that triggered this entire situation, the intercept mentioned earlier, and what it may actually contain. And if the reports are true, then this isn't just preparation anymore. It's the final stage before action. And once you hear what was inside that message, you'll understand why the Pentagon moves so fast. Now we come to the moment everything hinges on. The intelligence intercepts. The one piece of information that, according to insider sources, triggered the Pentagon's sudden decision to raise alert levels across multiple bases at once. And what you're about to hear changes the entire picture. Late on April 15th, at approximately 11:52 p.m. Gulf Standard Time, signals intelligence units monitoring encrypted communications in southern Iran reportedly captured a transmission unlike anything they had seen in recent weeks. This wasn't routine chatter. It wasn't fragmented or coded beyond recognition. It was structured, layered, and most importantly, it was time-sensitive. According to confidential informants with direct knowledge of the analysis, the transmission included 3 critical elements: a sequence identifier, a coordinated timing window, and what appears to be a multi-phase operational reference. In simple terms, it looked like a launch protocol. I need you to understand how serious this is, because military communications like this don't just happen randomly. They are part of a chain that leads to execution. And once that chain is in motion, stopping it becomes incredibly difficult. Now here's where things take a turn no one expected. The timing window embedded in that intercept reportedly pointed to a narrow operational window between April 16th and April 17th, a span of less than 36 hours. That means the moment this signal was decoded, the clock started ticking fast. But wait, what happened next will shock you. Within minutes of confirming the intercept, U.S. Central Command initiated what insiders are calling a silent surge protocol. This isn't something you hear about in public briefings. It's not announced. It's not acknowledged. It's executed quietly, rapidly, and with absolute urgency. Aircraft were repositioned, defensive systems were activated, personnel were moved into hardened shelters, and across key installations, live fire authorization protocols were reportedly updated, meaning units were prepared to engage without delay if a threat was confirmed. This wasn't preparation for a possibility. This was preparation for something expected. Stay with me because this next part changes everything. As analysts continued to decode the intercepted transmission, a second layer of information began to emerge, one that has not been publicly confirmed but is now being discussed among defense circles. The message may have referenced multiple target zones, not just one base, not just one country, multiple. That suggests a coordinated strike plan, one designed to hit several U.S. positions across the Gulf at nearly the same time. A synchronized operation using drones, cruise missiles, and possibly short-range ballistic systems launched from different locations. If that's true, then what we're looking at isn't just escalation, it's orchestration. And here's the pattern interrupt you need to hear. In previous conflicts, including the January 2020 Fresin Sur and Hasur and Sur and a Target 20 missile strike following the death of General Qasem Soleimani, Iran launched over a dozen ballistic missiles targeting U.S. forces in Iraq. That attack was significant. But this could be far more complex, far more widespread, and potentially far more dangerous. Because this time, according to insider sources, the strategy may not be symbolic. It may be overwhelming. I need you to understand how serious this is. Because a multi-location strike changes the rules. It forces the U.S. to defend multiple fronts at once. It stretches response capabilities. It creates confusion, delay, vulnerability. And in those first few minutes, everything matters. Now let's talk about global reactions, because they're already starting. By early morning on April 16th, intelligence sharing channels between the US, the UK, and key NATO partners were reportedly activated. British defense officials, according to confidential informants, were briefed on the situation and advised to prepare contingency responses for assets in the region. France and Germany have not made public statements, but diplomatic sources indicate heightened concern. Meanwhile, in the Gulf, regional allies are watching closely. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain. All of them are within range of Iranian missile systems. All of them are now potential collateral zones in a wider conflict. And here's the unexpected twist. According to one senior defense analyst speaking anonymously, there's a possibility that the intercept wasn't just a signal of intent, but a trigger. A trigger for units already in position, meaning the decision may already have been made. The assets may already be deployed, and the only thing left is execution. Let that sink in for a moment, because if that's the case, then everything we're seeing right now, the alerts, the movements, the silence, isn't about preparing for something that might happen. It's about bracing for something that could already be underway. Now here's the part that brings us back to the question we opened in part 1. What exactly is coming and when? Based on the timing window extracted from the intercept, that answer may be closer than anyone is comfortable admitting. We're not talking about days. We're not even talking about hours. We're talking about a narrowing window where every second counts. And if that window closes with action, the consequences will be immediate, severe, and global. But the worst part, that comes next. Because in part 4, we're going to break down exactly what happens if this situation crosses the line, the 3 possible scenarios that could unfold, and what they mean not just for the region, but for the world. And trust me, none of them are minor. Now we're at the point where everything converges. The alerts have been raised. The intercept has been decoded. The assets are in position. And the only question left is, what happens next? Because if this situation crosses the line, if even a single missile is launched or a drone strike is confirmed, the consequences won't be contained to one base or one country. This becomes something much bigger, much faster than most people realize. So let's break this down clearly, not speculation, but realistic scenarios based on how conflicts like this actually unfold. The first scenario is limited engagement. In this case, Iran launches a controlled strike, possibly targeting a single U.S. base or a specific military asset in the Gulf. The objective here wouldn't be total war. It would be signaling, a show of strength, a message sent without triggering full-scale retaliation. You've seen this before. Back in January 2020, after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Iran launched missiles at U.S. positions in Iraq. The strikes were calculated, measured, designed to demonstrate capability without pushing the situation beyond control. But here's the difference now. This time, the buildup is more complex. The signals are more aggressive. And according to insider sources, the scale being prepared for is larger, which brings us to the second scenario. regional escalation. And this is where things start to get dangerous. If multiple targets are hit across Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, even if casualties are limited, the U.S. response becomes unavoidable. Airstrikes naval retaliation, cyber operations, and suddenly you're not looking at a single exchange. You're looking at a sustained conflict across the Gulf. I need you to understand how serious this is, because once that level is reached, other players start getting involved. Allies, partners, regional powers, shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz could be disrupted. Oil markets could spike overnight. Airspace could be restricted. Civilian infrastructure could be impacted. And the ripple effect, it doesn't stay in the Middle East. It reaches Europe, Asia, global markets, everything connected starts to feel it. But wait, the third scenario is the one that keeps military planners up at night. Full-scale confrontation. This is the scenario where the initial strike triggers a chain reaction. Rapid retaliation, counter-retaliation, escalation beyond control. Multiple waves of attacks. Air defenses overwhelmed, and then naval assets engaged, and potentially direct strikes on Iranian territory. At that point, this is no longer a regional issue. This becomes a global crisis, because once major powers are pulled in, once alliances are activated, the scale expands beyond anything we've seen in years. And here's the part that makes this moment historic. We are standing at the edge of that decision point right now, not in theory, not in analysis, but in real time, because based on everything we've broken down, the intercept, the timing window, the movements on both sides, the next move is not hypothetical. It's imminent. And I need you to understand how serious this is, because moments like this don't happen often. This is the kind of moment that defines decades, that reshapes alliances, that changes the balance of power in ways people don't fully understand until years later. And you're watching it unfold as it happens. Now, here's something to think about. If the U.S. is already on maximum alert, if Iran has already positioned its assets, if the timing window is as narrow as insiders suggest, then the decision may already have been made. We just haven't seen it play out yet, so the real question isn't just what happens next. It's whether anything can still stop it, or if we've already crossed the point where events start moving on their own. Because once that happens, there's no pause button. Now I want to hear from you. Based on everything you've seen, the alerts, the intercept, the buildup, do you think this ends with a limited strike? Or are we looking at something much bigger? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want to stay ahead of stories like this, not just headlines, but the deeper analysis, the signals behind the scenes, the details most people miss, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because when the next update drops, you're going to want to know immediately.